There was an interviewer that asked Herb Kelleher, who was the founder and CEO of Southwest Airlines, he asked him what his company's trick was to getting employees to smile all of the time. "It's easy," said Kelleher. "We just hire smiley people." One thing that I figured out over the years is that intelligent people really tend to overcomplicate things. Let me tell you a story about a company that simplified their problem and has saved hundreds of thousands of lives in the process. This is one of my favorite stories that I've come across in recent times. So for context, 99% of neonatal deaths occur in low to middle income countries, where infant incubators are cost prohibitive. Basically, they cost about $25,000 for an incubator. So in 2007, for graduate students at Stanford, they were challenged to design an incubator at 1% of the price. So for $250, they were challenged to design an incubator. Now, this team was made up of electrical engineers, computer scientists, MBA students. And so they did what any of us, I think, would probably start with. They started with what they already knew. They tested cheaper materials, they designed more efficient engineering, and they did get the cost down considerably, not quite to 1%, but they got the cost down considerably. Then they traveled to Kathmandu. Once they were in Nepal, they saw a whole bunch of empty incubators in the hospitals. And they were like, "What the heck's going on?" They were asking the hospital administrators. They were like, "We've been working our butts off over here to design cheaper incubators so that you could afford them. And then we get here and we look in the hospital and you've got all these things already here and they're sitting empty. They're not being used. What's the story?" So the problem, they were told, wasn't a lack of incubators in the hospitals. It was that the mothers lived far away rural villages and they had unreliable electricity and often couldn't read. It's not how smart you are. It's how you are smart. Before you try harder, make sure you're on the right path. Before you work on a solution, make sure you understand the problem. A baby born prematurely can't regulate their own temperature. Incubators keep their body at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Travel to regional hospitals could take as long as a day if the mother could afford it, and babies often died en route. Hospitals didn't need cheaper incubators. Remote medical clinics needed a way to keep babies warm without electricity. So the result of all of this was the Embrace Infant Warmer, which is a portable sleeping bag with a pouch that can be reheated hundreds of times with hot water. At a cost of only $20, it's 1,000 times cheaper than an incubator to manufacture, and it saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Perspective is everything, isn't it? In a 2011 TED Talk, Roy Sutherland said that people who have an existing framework, an economic framework, an engineering framework, feel that actually logic is its own answer. We prioritize what I'd call mechanistic ideas over psychological ideas. Spreadsheet-driven ideas are often a misguided default. Blunt force, doing more of the same thing that isn't working, just better or harder or faster, results from insular thinking. Injecting our existing biases shields us from elegant truths. Complex problems don't necessarily require complex solutions. Here's a few more quick examples. The Toronto Transit Commission, the TTC, installed a countdown clock at each station. Instead of making trains go faster, all that they did was they reduced the uncertainty around the wait. Jay Sorensen invented the coffee cup sleeve in 1991. Instead of designing a more insulated takeaway coffee cup, he just made a cheap cover. Speaking of coffee, Starbucks knows that people are willing to wait longer once they order, so instead of speeding up the drink-making process, they just take your order quickly. Easy, right? Here's a messed up stat. In 2022, the pharmaceutical, vitamin, and supplement industries were worth $660 billion. The entire rest of the health, fitness, and gym industries combined only generated $30 billion. That is insane. Cures and quick fixes should not account for 21 times more revenue than prevention. There's a lot of reasons why the above stat is as appalling as it is. One that we don't talk about enough is that symptoms are simply more intellectually interesting to us than prevention. As a result, the smartest people tend to focus their efforts on treatment, not prevention. Persuading somebody to quit smoking is a psychological exercise. It has nothing to do with molecules and genes and cells. And so, people like me are essentially uninterested in it. That quote comes from Robert Weinberg, who's a cancer researcher at MIT. Avoiding problems is more valuable than treating symptoms. The issue with the best solutions is that you often don't know whether they worked or not. So the result's an awkward void. In response, we add needless complexity in order to give us a comforting impression of control, looking for problems when they don't exist to fill the space. When something bad happens and it gets fixed, there's a reward. When nothing bad happens, there's nothing to fix and nobody gets rewarded. That's a mind-boggling concept to wrap my head around. To be clear, cancer researchers like Weinberg do important work. Treatment's enormously valuable. But it's fascinating to consider how much both individual intellectual stimulation and prestige impact our approach to solving our own problems. From a young age, we've been indoctrinated to assume that it has to be hard if it's going to work. That's simply not true. What I want to talk about here is how to ask the right questions to find the easier way. I want to talk about getting customers. I want to talk about hiring. I want to talk about generating referrals. But I'm going to tell you a quick story about how slow people were to use seatbelts. So in 1955, 37,000 Americans died in car accidents. If you adjust that for miles driven, it's 6 times today's rate, or about 258,000 deaths. That same year, Ford began offering seatbelts in cars for $27, adjusted for inflation, about $300 today. Despite research at that time which showed that seatbelts reduced fatalities by 70%, guess what percentage of customers upgraded in 1956 to get seatbelts?
It's going to be depressing.
2. The answer is 2%.
Oh, damn. It's like a person.
In 1968, Congress mandated that all cars be outfitted with seatbelts, but using them was voluntary. Most Americans didn't. As late as 1983, seatbelt usage was still less than 15%. It took almost 50 years for seatbelt usage to increase to over 80%. Most humans never change. They like what they like and they do what they do. Now, in some cases, like with seatbelts, change eventually comes, but it's agonizingly slow. I guess what I'm saying is that resisting change is completely normal human behavior. And so, if you need people to change in order to buy your thing, you're playing the game of business on hard mode. It's far easier to find people already doing the thing and then get them to be your customer. These days, Joel Weldon's a Hall of Fame professional speaker. But he struggled early on. In 1971, it took him 1,200 calls to make his first sale of Earl Nightingale success tapes. This is what Joel said. He said, it was $175 for 6 cassettes and a loose leaf book. So that's about $1,300 today. And we had to provide a tape recorder because people didn't even have a cassette recorder in those days. This dude literally had to sell somebody a cassette recorder in order to sell them cassette tapes. If you think what you sell is hard.
It's like selling a street to sell a car. By the way, do you have a street to drive this on? We've got one for you.
So I talk about, I unrelated to this, to what I'm presenting on right now, but where the story comes from. And this is why it's so much fun to get out into the world and like meet people and talk to people. I met Joel on a golf course behind where my parents stayed in Arizona when we were with my parents, when Calvin was about 1.5 years old, because people would walk their dogs on golf courses at night in Arizona because they're public parks. And we'd always bring Calvin out. And I met Joel and we hit it off. And he was telling me a little bit about what he does because he found out I was in the fitness industry. He's worked with a bunch of people in the fitness industry and we knew some common people. And he told me this story. And then I looked it up and I found a podcast where he also told the story and filled it in. But it's so much fun to be able to bring these experiences and these just incredible examples of this type of stuff that you would just never have heard about before, right? This is why you talk to random people, because you just like, everybody has these amazing stories. Anyway, here's the rest of what Weldon said there. He said, I was calling on people that I knew could benefit from this, and they would listen to it, but they couldn't afford it or didn't want to spend the money. So in desperation, Weldon actually called the most successful person that he knew. And it was a real estate agent developer named David Jones. Within 5 minutes of David hearing a Nightingale tape, he said, stop. There's more of these. I want them. Weldon replied, you want them? You're the most successful guy that I know. Why would you want this? To which David said, because I need to be reminded. Joel then said that he was calling people who needed help, those people who were struggling in their marriage and in their business, but nobody was buying. David said, you're talking to the wrong people. You've got to talk to successful people. Weldon learned his lesson and became the top salesperson in the Nightingale Content organization. His advice later on was that when you're selling success, you call on successful people. When you're selling improvement, you call on people already committed to improvement. If you look in the gym, who are the people already in the gym? Fit people. People who buy lots. People who don't. A few more examples. If you sell silicone baby toys, team up with home air purification system companies. Parents who care about removing toxins care lots. If you write fan fiction, focus on existing readers. People who read lots. If you make fancy cheese, produce weekly reviews of the best crackers. People who snack lots. Trying to convince somebody to change in order to buy from you is hard. Instead, find people already doing the thing you help people do. Today, Clay Hebert is one of the most sought-after brand strategists in the United States. When he was young, he sold chocolate bars in front of a grocery store as part of a school fundraiser. Clay's key insight was that it's not about the candy bar. It's about the person and wanting to support a kid bundled up, freezing his toes off because he had to stand outside. And so, Clay said, I did my first and hopefully last slightly unethical marketing strategy, which was I brought my older brother's clothes in a grocery bag, and when about 6 of the people had bought the candy bars on their way in, I ran around the corner, changed my clothes, and those same people bought on the way out. James is a guy that I know who sells online coaching packages for $5,000, while many of his colleagues struggle to charge $50. If I told you James's real name, you wouldn't be able to find him online. He doesn't use social media, he doesn't run ads, and he doesn't have a website. His entire web presence is an application form hosted on Google. Now, it wasn't always this way. Not long ago, James was struggling. His paid ads were not converting. Oh, sorry, David, not James. I called him James in one place, David on another. Obviously, I changed his name. As a last resort, he invested everything he had into a business mastermind. It cost him $10,000, and he had to spread the investment out over 12 months. His initial goal was to learn how to write better advertising copy, create more compelling content, and run more effective paid ads. He thought it was the only way to get clients. Mindset, mental health, fitness, and nutrition questions always came up in the mastermind's private community. So David gave detailed answers, like in the community. He was just being helpful. It didn't take long for him to become the de facto wellness expert in this group of high achievers. And so members of the mastermind hired him. This mastermind was full of men who are already investing $10,000 a year on personal development. What does that mean? That means, number 1, these men have money. Number 2, these men spend money. Number 3, these men are already investing in themselves to build a better future, right? People who hire expensive online coaches hire a lot of coaches, and people who don't. Realizing that he stumbled upon a gold mine, David joined another mastermind with the income from his first 3 clients, and he repeated the process. He now spends upwards of $100,000 a year on these groups and makes over $1 million. David hasn't created a piece of content on social media or paid for an advertisement since. If a costly mastermind doesn't exist, or this example doesn't apply to you, or it's simply too expensive for you to join right now, then make your own group, community, or event. For example, if I owned a flower shop and wanted to become the obvious choice, I'd start a group of local growers to share tips and tricks. Then I'd create a series of categorical awards for best local gardens and host a yearly garden gala where people dress up and drink bubbly alcoholic drinks from silly thin glasses while we announce the winners. Why? Because people who garden buy flowers. And people who don't. I'm going to take a break and take some water.
You
Feel free
deserve
to
some
add
water,
anything.
John.
Yeah.
You've done a fantastic job. This tracks back to the complaint that we often see in our groups when coaches say, I've got all these coaches following me and I can't sell any stuff. Guess who you could sell your stuff to? The coaches following you because they love it.
What percentage of your clients work in the fitness and health industry? Right?
40 easily. At any given time, 55 to 60. But generally speaking, 40% of my clientele is either a nutritionist, nutrition coach, trainer, or like group fitness instructor. They love coaching.
Of course.
You know?
And it's pretty hard for them not to be able to justify the expense, right? It's pretty hard for them to say it's not worth it.
They do the exact same thing. They're talking about coaching every day. And to your point, like good coaches are very aware when they're about to be gifted with good coaching. They have a great ability to discern that, oh yes, this is coach for me. Like there's not a lot of back and forth with coaches when they're selecting coaching, typically. And case in point, I won't say her name for privacy reasons because we don't have permission to, but one of your fitness clients, Ren, actually just registered for the online trainer mentorship. Yes, we had that conversation with the nameless person in question. People who buy coaches buy a lot of coaches. Right? People who believe in it, and people who don't. And I love that line. Yeah. People who buy lots. People who don't. I think that's the type of thing that needs to be plastered on a bumper sticker. Smack dab in front of your face everywhere you go. People who snack lots. People who don't. That's my favorite. The cheesy
You've had
crackers.
a few Dr. Seuss related lines.
Yeah. It's snacks. I rock with the snacks. More
we
snacks,
all rock
please.
with the snacks.
We got to give Amber some snacks, man. She's snack deficient, and it's breaking my heart.
Snackless.
Yeah.
Breaking my heart when I don't snack. When we're apart. Snackless.
In South Carolina.
Snackless in South Carolina.
There's a country song for you.
That's funny. Fuck, that's funny. So, okay. Just because something's easy, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, and I think it's really important to differentiate between the two. You might choose hard, so let me explain really quick. There's a joke in the fitness industry that fit people don't belong in the gym. Joke is like, you're done, go home. But that's not how it goes, of course. Already fit people invest the most time and money on fitness, despite needing it the least. Therefore, the easiest way to make money in fitness is to target already fit people and ignore sedentary ones. Caring people say they want to help people. The sad reality is that some people are simply not willing to invest in being helped. Now, I wish it wasn't this way. There's different definitions, though, with professional success. If you work in fitness, for example, you may decide that even though it'll be harder to build a business, it's more personally rewarding to help inactive or overweight people. There's no right or wrong. There is, however, easier and harder. You might still decide to tackle harder problems for reasons that can be quite noble, and many do. What are you thinking, Amber? You have the thinking look.
Yeah, I'm not good at masking my face. So I was just thinking how often coaches choose hard out of insecurity. And so I was thinking through that process of, and I hadn't put that thought fully together yet when you caught me thinking, just how that influences choosing easy versus choosing hard. Are they deliberately choosing hard because that's really where their heart is, or is it because they feel insecure? And so that's where my brain was going.
Insecurity? I've never thought about this angle of it, but is it insecurity, or is it just kind of the result of being in an echo chamber? Like, this is what you know, so you do what you know, and you talk the way that you know to speak. So we maximize our own thing. We think about our own thing all of the time, and so the way that we speak kind of unconsciously assumes that other people think and understand the same things that we do, and so I wonder whether that's it. I wonder whether it's insecurity. I don't know.
I
There's
think
layers to it, and there should be different people that feel differently from the people that I talk to, because I tend to attract the people that feel insecure.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sure Ren, has a lot of these too. It's just we're safe people to share weird things with, right? And so we get a lot of that. So it might be my own kind of confirmation bias there, but that's what I see.
I ride with Amber on this one. I'm on that side of the fence too. Like, there's some insecurity that leads to the desire for complexity. One of the hardest things to do as a coach is to simplify someone's life. Yeah. Because they often won't allow you to simplify the thing that they're trying to attain. They will fight against one of the end sections then. Oh, you got I'm picking your brain again. You've already addressed it.
No, it's like there's a logical flow to this kind of discussion, right? And so you're obviously super on it and attentive. You always are, and I appreciate that about you. And so you're one step ahead of me, but you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah. Like, you want to really have some struggles as a coach? Mm-hmm. Simplify something for the person that hired you. Or I should say, attempt early on to simplify it for them. And you're getting a lot of pushback. A lot of it.
Yeah. Okay. Let me keep going, because I kind of want to hit this all in this episode.
Go ahead, John.
It's long. So we're going to talk about hiring next. Four Seasons Hotel and Resorts employs about 45,000 people. And so, obviously, they have a pretty robust recruitment and hiring process. To hire his first ever employee, though, Isidore Izzy Sharp, who's the founder of Four Seasons, he walked into the most amazing name, and a Jew, of course. He walked into the most popular hotel in Toronto at the time, because the Four Seasons started in Toronto, and it was called the Westbury. And he told the general manager that he was looking for a manager for his hotel and asked if he knew anybody. The manager made an introduction. According to Izzy, here's how he interviewed his first ever employee. He said, "I went in and met this man. His name was Ian Monroe. So I talked to him about what I was intending to do, and he gave me his list of things he had done, and we had a nice, charming conversation. So I hired him. Now, I don't know how to interview people and how to hire people. I'm a 25-year-old construction guy, and well, that became the beginning." Izzy knew what he didn't know. Hire slow, fire fast, they say. And maybe that's good advice, but in my experience, people make it way harder than it needs to be early on. All of the advice I've seen about hiring is for large companies, ignoring the fact that all large companies started as small companies, and when those smaller companies started hiring early on, they didn't know what they were doing. Professionals who dedicate their lives to it make the right choice one out of every 3 hires. Interviewing somebody for a job is almost impossibly difficult. There's this Instagram page that I follow. It had 650,000 followers. And they put a post up looking for their first ever staff member, which was a half-time customer service rep. The next day, they posted a story saying that they got 500 responses and are reading each one and asking their audience to please be patient. What an incredible waste of time. They have an app. It would have taken them 20 minutes to scan community posts and identify a naturally helpful and empathetic person, reach out, and offer the job. Identify a similar job or skill and work backwards. Yes, that is exactly how I hired Amber, by the way. Identify a similar job or skill and work backwards. Think, where is that skill being demonstrated at a high level? When you're looking to hire early on, admit your ignorance. Like Izzy, start by finding people already doing the thing. Years back, I had lunch with the guy who ran the BlendTech USA department. So they sell blenders, right? And he told me about his first day on the job with the company's president. Walked into his office, the president said, "Don't sit down, we're going to recruit." They walked into a toy store in New York City. Supposedly, the store hired theater performers and dressed them up as movie performers. BlendTech, according to the president, sold a lot through live demonstrations in stores like Costco. He said, "Teaching our staff about blenders is the easy part. What we need are performers who can engage a crowd." The toy store did the hard work of finding performers and putting them on display. As the story goes, the BlendTech president walked up to the best ones, handed them a card saying, "If you ever want to make real money, give me a call." Recruiting done. One more quick example. For 8 years, I published a weekly roundup of the best fitness content on the internet, and it became the industry standard. Tens of thousands of personal trainers relied on us to curate their ongoing education. I needed to hire 2 people from outside of my company to choose its contents. On a Friday night at 7:45 p.m., I posted a note on Facebook that said, "If you're reading fitness blogs right now, send me a message with the last 2 posts you read. I want to pay you for what you're doing." Only obsessive nerds read fitness blogs on Friday nights. It was the easiest job search I've ever done. It took me 15 minutes. Danny and Megan, they ran that list for, 3 years, 4 years?
Mm-hmm. And they have time because they chose to do it instead of going out on a Friday night.
Right. Right. I'm choosing to spend my Friday doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I got time.
Yep. Or maybe they're going out and maybe they're doing this before they go out because this is how they get themselves all jacked up for the club to
pre-gaming with fitness content.
Yeah, maybe this is how they pregame.
Please do a reel about that, Ren. Like, oh my god, what's some weird science thing? Like, let's go party. Yeah. Oh my god, that would be amazing.
I just may.
Let's talk about referrals now. Giovanni Mosico today runs the Archangel Academy, which is one of the largest communities of heart-centered entrepreneurs. Very, very close friend. In 2006, he worked as a marketing consultant. Here's how he helped a little fitness studio get so many referrals from local business that they became a multi-million-dollar business themselves. So first, they wrote a list of all the areas where a member at their gym might also invest their time, energy, and money to get to a similar goal. Next, he surveyed the gym members, asking for their favorite things like tanning salons, hair studios, massage therapy clinics, spas, chiropractors. Think, who are your people, and what other businesses like yours do they buy from? With the data from the survey, he called the top choices and said, "Hey, I'm from Bodies by Design. We asked our members what their favorite spa in the area was, and you were number 1. Can we send more people to you?" Of course, they said yes. He then asked them for an introductory offer to pass along, and he included it in a booklet of gift certificates that they called Our Favorite Places. Then he wrote a letter for the other businesses to distribute that said, "We already know a lot of you love Bodies by Design. If you're not already a member, Chris, the owner, wants to pay for your first session. Here's 3 $90 gift certificates for you and 2 of your friends." Overnight and with very little effort, Body by Design became the obvious choice in their community. Whenever somebody asks me what to do because their content isn't converting, I know that they're hoping for some kind of an algorithm hack or conversion secret. Like there's something almost mystically complicated that they're missing, that once they figure it out, all of their problems will be solved. Instead, I ask them to tell me about the best customer they've ever worked with. And then after they answer, I ask where that customer came from. I've gone through this process at least 30 times, and they've never answered social media, not once. It's always been some kind of a word of mouth referral. And yet, they focus on social media, posting multiple times a week, chalking up referrals to luck, chance, or happenstance. Now, I want to be clear, social media can work, it's just hard. Ignoring the work to create the content, people on there have no reason to trust you, right? You're just another person on the internet. The easiest sale you're ever going to make is to a referred customer. So another example, this time from an online company. Mike Dola ran an online nutrition coaching company called Stronger You. he'd give his successful clients gift cards to their favorite stores for new clothing because their old stuff didn't fit. It was not a gift card for a referral. It was a way for them to celebrate their own success. Buying new clothes after losing weight is a big deal. His clients rightfully celebrated it, with Mike's encouragement, of course, by taking pictures at the store and posting them on social media. Their friends and family would congratulate them and send messages asking how they lost the weight. Mike got referred. After doing this for a few years, Mike sold his company for 8 figures and retired in his 30s. Referrals are hard to teach because they're a psychological lesson, not an economic one. In terms of tangible value, it's always a bad deal for the customer. They're sending you a valuable customer, and in exchange, you're giving them what? Like a gift card to a coffee shop? The secret to easy referrals is to make the other person or company look good. Here's one final example. My son finished a week of summer camp. He won the community award for his group. Now, don't be impressed. Every kid wins an award every week. The next day, though, I noticed a sign on our lawn that said, "My son just won the community award at Super Fun Time Sports Camp." I changed the name for privacy reasons. The camp put it there. Fucking brilliant. We left the sign up for a while. Our neighbor saw it and asked if my son liked the camp. I said yes. They registered their kid for the following week. If a hockey team
you can't take it down. Your kid, like, if they see it, you can't take it down. 'Cause I would be mad if they put it in my yard. But also, like,
but would you?
I can't take it out now.
I mean, you would. Like, I'm a big proponent of asking for forgiveness. Like, even if you're like I looked at it and I was like, those savvy bastards. But like, some people might look at it. Some people might look at it and be like, oh, you know what? Why are they putting it? But you're not ever going to be like so upset that you're never going to go back to that camp.
Right.
No. But my initial would be irritation, and then that was really smart. But irritation.
But even if you're irritated, so you take the sign down, you throw it in the garbage.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
I mean, it's just or throw it in the recycling.
Yeah. Green.
Now I have a really fun, obscenely Canadian example for you guys. You ready for this?
Please.
Neither of you will understand this.
Good.
If a hockey team is losing at the end of the game, the coach removes the goalie in favor of an extra attacker.
Lost me. I'm out.
This would be a lot better if it was football. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm out, dude. Go ahead with your little Canadian story. Whatever.
Yeah. I love how Canadians are so proud whenever the Canadian hockey team like wins some international competition. It's like the only reason that we won is because nobody else cares about this sport.
Right.
And we don't even win every time. Like, that's how sad it is. Doing this is a risk that gives the losing team a better chance at scoring a goal to tie the game, but it also, of course, increases their chance at getting scored on and being embarrassed. Now, convention is to pull the goalie with 1 to 2 minutes left in the game. Every red-blooded Canadian knows that. Data, however, suggests a different story. According to one of the best studies of all time called Pulling the Goalie, Hockey and Investment Opportunities, yes, this is a real thing, it's irresponsible to wait that long. Instead, a goalie should actually be pulled with 6 minutes and 10 seconds left in the game when they're down by 1 goal, and 11 minutes and 30 seconds in the game when they're down by 2 goals. And actually 25 minutes if they're down by 3 or more goals, which means that the data actually shows that you should pull your goalie with more than a period left if you're down by more than 3 goals. I'm going to apologize for what I'm about to say. I don't know why I'm saying sorry, but I feel like saying sorry.
It's in your DNA.
Yeah, it's Canadian.
Pulling your goalie nearly quadruples the probability of your opponent scoring, while not even doubling your own chance of scoring. But standing points is what matters. Losing by 2 goals or 10 is no worse than losing by 1. Both result in 0 points. Therefore, a team gains a lot by scoring and loses little by getting scored on. Practicing optimal goalie pulling gains an average of 0.05 more points per game. In an 82-game season, that's an extra 4.18 points, which is enough to make a material difference in the end-of-year standings. So what if the losses that team had were blowouts? Entrenched conventions are very often wrong. Data plays a central role in other major sports. It's led to more 3-point attempts in basketball, shorter starts by pitchers in baseball, and risky fourth down conversion attempts in football, like the one by the Philadelphia Eagles in the 2018 Super Bowl where quarterback Nick Foles caught a pass in the end zone. Going forward at 4th and goal, down 3 points in the second quarter, was a risky play call by Doug Peterson, who was the coach of the Eagles. Convention was to kick the easy field goal to tie the game. If the trick play didn't work, this would have gone down as one of the worst play calls in history. Peterson was going to be either the hero or the loser. Coaches aren't actually rewarded for winning. They're rewarded for being perceived as good coaches. The two are closely related, but they're not actually the same thing. Malcolm Gladwell argues that the reason coaches don't pull the goalie earlier is that they don't want to lose their jobs. The authors of the study, Asmus and Brown, they wrote that sins of commission are far more obvious than sins of omission. The hockey coach who pulls his goalie down 0-2 with 10 minutes left and loses 0-5 is going to face harsh criticism from every quarter. A coach who quietly loses 1-2, pulling his goalie only in the final minute, can hold his head up and say that his guys played hard and the puck didn't roll their way tonight. It was a close game and they'll work even harder to get the breaks tomorrow. They also wrote, essentially, winning ugly is undervalued versus losing elegantly. And losing ugly can be career suicide. We all have competing motivations to make the right decision and to feel like we can justify why we made a decision if things go wrong. Following misguided conventions and losing preserves our status. Disagreeability, even if you're objectively correct, feels risky. We become good at what we practice even if we are practicing what is not good for us, wrote Don Depani, who's a Hindu priest and entrepreneur coach. He also said, where awareness goes, energy flows. The best way to understand this statement is to look at energy the same way you look at water. If I took a watering can and I watered a garden bed, would the weeds or the flowers grow? The answer is both. Because water has no ability to differentiate between weeds and flowers. Whatever gets watered in the garden will start to grow. Energy works in exactly the same way. Discovering you're easy is really about focusing your energy on the right problems, even if it challenges the way things are supposed to be done. Shane Snow is a science and business journalist. He gets hired to force executives to watch Sesame Street. In one episode that he shows to these executives, Elmo wants to give a cookie to his friend, a rock. The rock doesn't have a mouth because it's a rock. It's a rock. Yeah, it's a rock. Snow then asks the executives how Elmo's feeling. They say that Elmo's mad or that the rock is delusional because it doesn't have a mouth. It's technically incorrect, says Snow. We don't observe that Elmo's mad because we can't feel his feelings. What we observe is that he raised his voice. What we observe is that he's throwing his hands up in the air. What we observe is that the color of his face changed. Based on that, one of our hypotheses is that he's mad, but that also leaves room for Elmo to tell us that he's not mad. He's frustrated. Smart people think too fast, assume patterns too readily, and jump to conclusions too quickly. It closes us off to opportunities. Snow suggests that we slow down, that we observe, not react. The beginning of this chapter told the story of the Embrace baby warmer. Now, originally, the team from Stanford was tasked to make a cheaper baby incubator. This constraint led to experiments with materials and with engineering. The problem, however, wasn't that lower-income countries needed cheaper baby incubators. It was that they needed to keep neonatal babies alive. By reframing the question into, how the heck does an incubator keep a baby alive? They discovered that regulating body heat was the key ingredient. It was this single insight that saved hundreds of thousands of lives. A friend of mine, Amber, not Amber Reynolds, a different friend of mine, Amber, asked me how to make more engaging Instagram content to attract customers. What often happens when smart people ask questions is they inject an assumed answer into the question. This closes you off to a potentially better way. The Sesame Street razor states that you never disguise your hypothesis as the question. Amber doesn't want Instagram growth. She wants more customers. By assuming that Instagram's the best option, she's shutting herself off from all other ways to get customers. Now, the corollary to the razor is that our brains solve problems better by working backwards than they do forwards. The trick is to assume that the problem has already been solved and retrace your steps. I asked Amber to tell me the name of the best customers she's ever worked with. Then I asked her where they came from. It was a referral. 90% of her business was referrals. Instagram has never generated her a good customer. We then began the process of tracing back the last 10 referrals, mapping the sources, and building a plan for outreach in similar places. Instead of creating content for Instagram, she took the best material she's already produced, branded it for collaborative partners, and allowed them to distribute it locally at their clinics and through their mailing list along with a gift card for her service as a value add. Easy feels like cheating. Hard feels like progress. When things feel harder than they should, pause. Consider what problem you're solving. Ask yourself, what problem am I solving, and is there an easier way? Do you want better customers? Find people already buying a service similar to yours. Do you need to hire? Work backwards from the primary attribute you need. Go to where it's already on display. Do you want referrals? Design a way for the other person to feel like they look good by talking about you. There's a saying that if you want to achieve a great time for swimming the 100 meters, it's a lot easier to swim with the tide than it is to work on your stroke. Stop making it harder than it already is.
I heard a really good mind shift around this. I'm not going to remember the whole story really well, but they were trying to brainstorm ideas with like their staff. And so they changed the language from what should you do to what could you do. Okay. And that one word shift made them think a little bit differently and outside of the box. So I've ever since I heard that, I really liked that because it just makes you think a little more creatively.
It almost seems like a dissociative question. It's like by dissociating yourself from the outcome and almost playing it like a game, you open up your brain to think differently and almost give it permission to explore in a different way. Is that the idea?
Yeah, basically, yeah. It takes you out of logic mode of what should I do? Yeah. And then because you have to narrow the field versus, okay, what are the possibilities? So having that permission to think differently.
Should implies such preset parameters, though. Should is almost comes with the prerequisite of an existing rule. So it's hard to think freely when you should do something. Right. I love that reframe. That's awesome, man.
That's a good reframe. Yeah. That's a good reframe. It's this idea. I mean, that kind of reframes you out of this idea of like disguising a hypothesis as a question. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a hypothesis, but you can't disguise that as your question. Now, the only bit there, and it doesn't quite fit in the book, I probably won't include it, but the only thing to think about there, I had a really good conversation with Shane about all this stuff, and the only thing that he said there is it is sometimes useful to add a constraint if the business has a constraint. You know, without spending any money, for example. Like if you know that you can't spend money. But you need to be careful because your constraint often also includes a hypothesis. So it's easier. Oh, what was the design thinking line that he gave? He's a big like design thinker, executive kind of coach guy, and it's this idea of basically like design then construct, like
Yeah.
actually separate the two and applying the scientific method to creativity.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the time we're so insular in how we think. And the problem is the world that we exist in is so bubbled off, is so cut off from the actual world at large and how much is going on, that what we think is such a tiny percentage of what actually goes on. And so when we ask questions, we ask these questions with all these assumptions, and it immediately just makes it way harder. Like this embrace baby technology, right? Like this idea of a material engineer or material scientist is going to figure out ways to use cheaper materials. In a logistics engineer is going to figure out a way to get that incubator to hospitals cheaper and maintain it easier and cheaper. And those can be quite useful, and they did get the cost down. But when you go outside of it and you reframe the problem, like, what are we actually doing? We got to keep babies alive. Who gives a shit if it's an incubator? What's the problem? We got to keep babies alive. Cool. Why do babies die? Well, they can't keep warm. Okay. How do you keep people warm in the forest? A sleeping bag. All right. Well, that's a lot easier, right? It becomes so simple when you reframe it. And that, to me, is the most appealing part about all of this. There was a line that I wrote down. Oh, God, it's later on here. But it actually comes from, I have it in the next chapter, but there's a clarity in simplicity. There's clarity and simplicity in obviousness. It's like the minute that you reframe it and ask the right question, it becomes so obvious what the right answer is. And that's how you know it. You're like, how the heck did I not think about this earlier? Like, why am I trying to hire like the Four Seasons is now? What a ridiculous concept. How did they get their first employee? Oh, just asked somebody if they knew somebody and then was like, yo, you look good. Let me hire you. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, of course that's how it works. Nobody knows what they're doing when they start a company. So it doesn't mean you go into it with complete ignorance. But what's the skill that I'm looking for here, right? Somebody messaged me today and asked me all of these like super detailed questions about how to set up the right kind of accounting and bookkeeping and everything for online training. And I was just like, dude. He's like, yeah, I mean, I'm really the type of person who likes to get all these things set up properly. I'm going to launch in like 2-3 months, and I just want to make sure that I get everything set up. I'm like, first of all, hire an expert. Like, I'm not telling you whether you should set up an S corp or an LLC or whatever it is in your state in the United States. Like, get a local lawyer, get a local accountant. They'll answer that question for you in about 2 minutes, better than I can. Why are you asking some guy you've never met on the internet who lives in Canada? But also, why are you why are you even messing around trying to set up your own bookkeeping? And I just said to him, I was just like, dude, why? Like, hire an expert and just start, man. You're going to spend 2 months dicking around with administrative stuff when you could be getting clients and training clients? What are you doing? There are a lot of problems that exist that are very difficult to solve before you have customers and money that become very, 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 very easy to solve once you have customers and money. So where are you starting? What am I doing? Finding another episode?
Probably.
All right. Let's do that. Scroll back in the Obvious Choice podcast feed. You could do this yourself, listener, but I'm going to do it for you. Let's see what seems to relate to this episode, kind of. Well, I take up time because Ren is not doing his usual job of
Now I'm just sort of relaxing.
taking up space. Yeah, no, you're chilling out, man.
Yeah.
All right. Let's, I don't know. Let's do a greatest hits episode. This is actually one of the first episodes that we ever recorded, and we brought it back for episode 112. It's sales strategy from the meat truck guy.
Oh, the old meat guy.
The old meat guy. And it's just it's on this idea of like, hey, there's a much easier way. You know, showing up in the neighborhood, either metaphorically or physically, and is a much easier, faster way, more profitable way to get customers than a lot of the stuff that a lot of people are doing online. And you can actually combine the two, probably for most. So even if you do want to purely work online, this is still probably worth listening to because it's going to cue your brain in a different way than having the 600th person tell you what hashtags to use and how to edit your reels because people's attention spans are slow these days or whatever they say. You know, like just kind of even if you do want to do reels on Instagram or whatever it is, and you want a better way. Yeah, at least this is going to get your brain thinking a bit different way, and then you can take that into your hashtags or whatever you do.
John's in and out, which is also what she said.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, there you go. Johnny came back. You left us for a minute, but it was probably recording. We just couldn't hear it.
Okay. So episode 112, sales strategy from the meat truck guy. Have a listen to that. Scroll back. Episode 112, podcast out. Talk soon. Bye-bye.